Matt's just sitting there, silently staring off into nothing. We're back to daytime podcast because I'm going to be out of town tomorrow, and I was out of town last week. But we got to squeeze this sumbitch in. Got to squeeze it in.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer.
Well, I'm going to kind of tell a story about something that happened to me that's going to then relate to what we're talking about. So I talked to Alex earlier this week, and I told him that, we weren't necessarily like having a pre-pro or anything or a pre-show, but we just touched on what we could talk about this week. And I had something that I was chewing on from an experience I had where a friend of mine got married at the courthouse, and I volunteered to take some photos of it. And that person likes my photography versus knows I can take pictures. And I felt like that person wanted me to kind of do my thing while they were getting married. And it kind of happened, but it didn't happen to the extent that I would have liked it to. So I want to talk about that and what contributed to my frustration looking back, but then how that connects to what we're talking about, which is like early YouTube, 2008 YouTube. And then the people that are making stuff on YouTube right now that is really engaging, but it's not the YouTube playbook at all.
And I think like, I do want to try to put a caveat in with the YouTube conversation of like, I don't know, in my head, I feel like I would start rolling my eyes.
Yeah.
At the idea of like, okay,
like YouTube. Right now, if you are listening to what we're talking
I'm
about,
going to be rolling my
roll
eyes.
your eyes.
Like,
yeah.
Like there is a disconnect a bit between like YouTube, and I think the way we see it though is that's just kind of that's our biggest plug into culture.
Yeah.
And obviously that's an area that we connect on. We put the podcast up there.
And when you say our, you mean you and me, not people.
You and me, and like that, I mean that's literally how you make a living.
Yes, yeah.
So it's just an area that comes up in conversation, which tends to that. But the caveat I want to make is like when we're talking about that, it's more of a vehicle for an idea.
Yep.
It's not. We're not.
Yes.
Diving into YouTube tactics or anything like that, but it is a vehicle for an idea that I think we've been, and also just you said something earlier when we were talking pre-show about just dissection of the form a little bit,
right?
And a lot of the form is visual communication and verbal communication. Yeah. And I think that's So I just kind of want to make that.
Absolutely.
We're not talking about like.
Yeah, we're not going to be dishing about like YouTube strategy or sort of like what's trending on YouTube or like anything like that. This is talking about the content that we have gravitated toward, and even I have embraced. Yeah. Some making it that way in some areas of my.
It's like we consume content through. I mean, content being anything. It's like we read. We, listen to podcasts. A lot of those are through YouTube. Yep. Or we find videos on YouTube, or we watch films. I feel like there's not there's very
and YouTube sometimes is the connective tissue between
like
what we buy at the used bookstore, what we pick up on Amazon, the books that we read, the movies we go see, the movies we revisit, some of the different art forms that at least I have been drawn to, photographers, filmmakers, writers.
A wonderful way to just see the world through somebody else's eyes for a few minutes. Yeah.
So to wrap up your caveat, I'm just going to add my thing to it, is just that we're going to be talking about these YouTube videos in how it relates to a concept in how artists or people who make things. Like where it comes from, what's at the center of it, the source of it, whatever. At least that's what I'm going to bring to it. You're going to bring your own your own stuff to it. Sorry, I'm a little inarticulate today. Okay, so the story about this wedding photography thing, because I don't shoot weddings. I don't do like commercial work. I don't do editorial
Was this here in
work
Omaha?
on photography. Yeah, I was here in Omaha. I did have, had a team help me shoot a wedding once, video, and I've obviously done documentary stuff that's like client work and all that. And when I'm holding a camera that's going to be capturing video, I've been doing it for so long that my brain really falls into a place of thinking about, for me, what kind of coverage and what kind of shot composition kind of captures the essence and the soul of the subject. But also brings my perspective on a toy maker in a shop, people that are doing a community garden, a musician who's, working on music. And it's very easy for me to fall into this place of just getting the shots and the coverage that when I am thinking about what I shot that day, and I don't mean or directed someone to shoot that day, I'm not kicking myself about, wish I would have got that shot, or I'm like looking at the room omnisciently and going, if I would have put myself there, that would have been really great, or why didn't I do that, or whatever. I'm not sort of doing a post-mortem on it and kicking myself for, I felt like I was in the flow, things were going well, whatever. There weren't all these other things affecting me making work. But at this wedding, and I knew it was happening when I was shooting, very small, so it was just the couple, and then two friends, and then me. And, there's the courthouse, and you're out, in like the lobby area, and I'm snapping a few pictures there, having conversation, then breaking out. And so it's a little bit difficult to get in the flow because I'm good friends with these people, so we're kind of hanging out. But then I'm like trying to break away to take photos, but then you're in a government building and we had to go through security to get in. Like, there's just like a little bit of awareness going on about like, what's the context of where we are, right? Yeah. Versus sort of just being present going, that's an interesting composition or whatever. So then the other couple that's going to be a witness for the bride shows up and we go into the courtroom. We had to step out to get some money to pay for the judge's fee or whatever it is that you have to pay. And then I got into kind of a vibe with the bride as she went to the ATM, and I'm taking photographs of her, and I'm like, this is what I wanted, right? I'm feeling it, right? Yeah. And there's a great, like what I felt was a great shot of her at the ATM, this wonderful image of, a woman in a white dress getting married, and she's withdrawing cash. Like, I'm just like, that's good, the one, right? Yeah. Then we get back into the courtroom, kind of talking, taking a few photos, clocking. I'm shooting on film, so I just can't shoot endlessly.
You're like,
right?
I've got 24 exposures.
I got to be careful. Yeah. So then the judge comes in, calls everybody up. I kind of okay with the judge. He's like, we'll just come back here. You can be back here. And like all of a sudden, like these gates went down where I'm like, is this only where I can be? Like, am I breaking some rule if I go on the other side of the courtroom and like, am I distracting him? Does he not want his face in the photo? And I'm like, but the shit already started, like the ceremony or whatever it is when it's just the judge doing it. Yeah. It started, and I'm like, well, can I interrupt? Can I say, hey, is it cool? Like, do you not want to be in the photos? So I'm kind of reeling from not knowing what the rules are. And I got locked into this spot behind the judge, and I just ended up basically firing off the roll with, a couple like 50, 85 millimeter shots of, bride and groom, nice blurry background, all that kind of stuff, close up of hands, the rings, like just kind of, good stuff that somebody's going to want to document the day, but it's not photography. It's something else. So that night I'm sitting there just sort of restless about it. And I'm starting to kind of walk through the space.
Monday morning quarterback a little bit.
Yeah. I'm walking through the space and I'm sort of reshooting it. Like, what would I'm free all of a sudden because it's not actually happening. And I'm walking through and I'm like, what angles? So there was the couple that was in attendance as the witnesses. I found myself in these compositions where like part of their head was sticking out of the groom's head at the altar, and it just looked weird. And so I kept trying to find a frame where like the groom's head was blocking them in the background. So it just looked like the husband and wife. And then I'm sitting there going, what a great shot it would have been to have framed it up so that the couple is in the background, all these empty seats, and it's just two people in the background and the bride and groom at the front, by the judge. Maybe the judge is a little dirty in frame or whatever. And then there's layers to that composition, right? You got the judge in the immediate foreground, you've got the bride and groom as your subjects, and then the distant background. Just that would have felt good to me, but I kept trying to frame them out to have a clean shot. And then I'm starting to go around the room, and I'm like, oh man, if I was in the back corner by the doors, and the two people in attendance, the only two people there, the whole courtroom's empty, two people sitting sort of in the middle of all these seats, bride and groom up at the front at this tall judge's desk, the judge kind of over them like a pharmacist, giving medication to someone in those old pharmacies. Bad lighting, from the clinical lighting, like just a real nice, like 28 millimeter wide shot of that whole space, just to set the context of what this was. And I'm like, man, that would have been a good shot. So I won't describe any more, but I probably came up with 3 or 4 shots that if I had it, could have a do-over, and you can't have do-overs with weddings. If I could have a do-over, I'm like, those were the shots.
Can't have do-overs with most
stuff,
photography, yeah.
I'm like, those were the shots. And then I start going, what happened?
Yeah.
What was going on? Because my photography muscles are not as honed as my video muscles, my motion picture muscles. I don't even think twice about it when I have video. It's we're documenting this thing, we're getting coverage, we're getting footage, whether it's fly on the wall or I'm directing people or whatever. Like, I take over the room because I have to get what I need to make the film, to make the video, whatever it is. And all this weird stuff just got in my head. Like, well, the parents of these people don't know that this is happening, but when they do eventually find out, I want them to be happy that they got these sort of like iconic, not cliche, but just sort of like the standard shots that you're supposed to get at a wedding. Whereas I know the groom really wanted those more photography, my unique perspective on the thing. Like, that's really what they were excited about. So I just got in this trap, and I'm like, so what happened? To me, I go back to acting school. You're in acting school, and this is what happened in acting school. I was out of my element. I didn't have any craft. I was just trying to survive it, right?
Yeah.
And
it almost, I get you've said before about not listening to the moment, but
that's
just waiting to say what you have to say.
Yep.
And that comes to mind right here. It's like, you're not listening to the and
that's right.
Maybe you were.
No.
Times, but
yes, a couple times I think I fell into it, but then something
you're listening for the end of their response, so you can give your line. So in acting school, I would craft a performance when I memorized my lines, and I would come in just on rails. Like, the director wouldn't be able to break me out of my preparation. Like, I clung to it like somebody might cling to the like a bathtub in a hurricane, like, I'm not letting go of this thing, because if I do, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to forget my lines. I'm going to, like, it's all going to fall apart. This thing that I had to craft to survive this. And it wouldn't be art. It would just be like execution of a task to get to the end. Now, with the acting school, it was like, I can't wait for this to be over. With photography, and even in this instance, I was looking forward to letting all that artifice and edifice fall apart so I could get in the flow. But it never did.
Well, it couldn't, because this is the other thing you're not aware of. I don't know how long this thing is. Is it 30 minutes? Is it 10 minutes?
Yeah.
So complete lack of experience, which is to me part of craft. Just having no idea. And then also the pressure of putting it on myself. Like, I want to get a little bit of video of this with my old camcorder, so I'm a little bit trying to do too much. I'm wearing multiple hats.
Things at once.
But
right?
I'm glad I brought the camcorder, because it kind of saved me, because when I shot my last shot on the main camera I had, the bride and groom hadn't kissed yet.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I've got the camera, so at least we'll have video of this, of this moment. So I even there at craft, right? You know how many shots you have. You're checking your counter.
Yeah.
You know how quickly you can reload or whether you can. You have multiple cameras because you're shooting film. So you got a quick swap to the next roll, whatever. Like that element of it too.
Anticipating.
Yeah, just knowing all the ins and outs, right? And I've never shot anything like that with film. It's always been our street photography or me going out and getting, cityscapes or rural landscape or whatever. And I'm like, okay, if I need
so
to
much
reload,
respect for like people covering events.
Oh man,
right?
big time.
And
Especially
like, I mean, the majority of the great photos.
Yeah.
Because I think since digital, we've kind of oversaturated. So there's not a lot of like iconic photos in the last 20 years or so.
Yeah.
But you had a lot of iconic photos when there was still magazine culture and things like that. And most of those guys were going out to cover these events.
That's right.
And pocket full of tri-X.
Yep.
And,
in combining all the skills and all the craft that they developed of that sort of supreme focus on the objective while still listening to the environment around them. If someone who was an authority figure or the client or whatever came in and tried to push them out of their flow, they don't know they're doing that, but they're trying to tell them, oh, we can't go over there, blah, blah, blah. The artist is just like, almost whatever it takes within reason. Like I'm not going to go lay down on railroad tracks or something to get the shot if there's a speeding train coming up or something like that. But they're not like worried about, well, does the judge want to be in the photos? Am I do I get in trouble if I photograph the judge? Is that like a rule and I don't know about it? All that kind of stuff.
You have the best excuse. Like I love it when people come up to me and they're like, "Can you delete that?"
Yeah, right. Well, sorry, I can't.
Film.
Yeah,
can't do it.
So I wasn't listening. I was listening, and this is what goes back to asking. I was listening to fear. I wasn't listening to the truth and the purity and the simplicity of the moment. And I let all of that stuff. I let authority figures in the room, an intimidating government facility, and just sort of like the, you've got armed guards, and not that they're going to come in and get after me because I'm shooting a wedding, but are they going to, I don't know. You're just sort of like in this place where you don't feel the ease of movement. You don't feel like that you can. I felt like I was stuck behind the judge at his. What do you call it?
I think it was. Would you say like there were walls that came down?
Yeah, just walls that came down, both mentally and sort of figuratively in the space, like figurative walls that were containing me, but then stuff in my mind as well. And so then what you make just turns into something, kind of mid, right? You're like, but they got the photo of her down the escalator and this, like, so what happened in the, then there's stuff like that. So I'm probably raking myself over the coals a little bit too much. I think they're definitely going to be happy with what they've got. I think expectations were low. Like we're asking a friend to do a favor. He's shooting on a camera he's never used before. He's doing something that's a little bit out of his normal, the normal type of workflow that he has. But at the same time, if you do show a couple photos where like, oh, that was really cool, that's a great moment. And then at the the biggest moment, the nuptials, sort of like,
didn't have that. Yeah.
Or even that person might go, oh, a shot from over here might have been good, or, whatever. Like we've got 15 shots of the two of us at various focal lengths from the same general perspective. One's a little bit left, one's a little bit right, all that kind of stuff. So I really kicked myself. And I'm wrapping up here as we segue into the other thing, because this is going to be connected. Part of me is happy that happens because it's learning, right? You learn through failure, even if it's just
you're building that
perceiving.
craft. Yeah.
And now next time you're sharper the next time something happens. You're going to have a conversation. I do this at least. All right. I kind of go through a checklist like, look, dude, you're in a place you're not familiar with. You don't know what this arena is like, or you don't know what this bar is like, or you don't know what this whatever place you're shooting in. You don't know what the rules are, the propriety, whatever. But your focus is on capturing the scene, the subjects, the story, whatever. And while you may not like hang from the rafters or get a rickety ladder and suspend yourself over, a precarious position or whatever, do anything that's really dangerous and unsafe, you need to focus on telling that story.
Yeah.
And when you see a shot in your mind, to move to that location and make it happen. Don't let these walls come down and lock you in. make sure
I think that goes for filmmaking too. Like
Absolutely.
you made a distinction between like video but I mean, that's the most important thing in film, right? It's like, when do you cut when you need to see something that's not in the shot? Like what needs to be in the shot and what doesn't to tell the story.
Right.
And like people get caught up in composition, and this goes for, I'm talking about both now, photography and film. And there's a lot of things that are similar between photography and cinematography. But yeah, like people get caught up in composition and yada, 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 yada. It's like at the end of the day, there are humans doing things in environments.
Yeah.
And all of those things feed into each other.
Mm-hmm.
The environment, the situation, the drama that's created in the situation, the interaction between the humans, the lack of interaction between the humans, whatever it is, it's all of these things build together to say something. And
That's right.
You need to figure out what is, even if it's just intuitively, you don't need to be like, what is this saying?
Yeah.
But you intuitively have to be like, what needs to be included in this to best portray the message? And if you can do that, you're going to make great work. It's just a matter of time and, attrition.
That's right.
But a lot of people are not. And I think part of it is that kind of fear of like, well, I don't know how this is going to look.
Yeah.
I've seen this before.
Right.
So this is the safe option. So I'm just going to do this. Like I have this image in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that one.
Yep.
So that one's more dangerous, therefore, because I've never, and it's like most of the time though, like if that one is what's called for, that's what's going to produce the best result, at least in my experience, or at least how I look at it. And that's tough. A lot of people don't point the camera at what's most important or what needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say what needs to be said, but it's not necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't want people to read that too literally.
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, super interesting. Sorry to cut you off. I just
no, you're not. I would definitely want to share my stuff and then hear your reaction to it. So again, I'm not beating myself up and you're a shitty photographer and all that. It's just an acknowledgement. Like, look, this stuff is these specific tools, and and it's nice to kind of feel a little bit of what the differences are between photography and video or film, and that a set of instincts for one medium needs to be adjusted for another, where instead of capturing moving pictures, you're capturing stills, and it's different. And it's also sometimes there's not imposter syndrome, but just sort of, I haven't logged a lot of hours doing this.
Yeah.
With video, I've been shooting video for 15 years. Like, it's just second nature to me to stand in a room and spray it down with coverage that I really quickly see in my mind, and then can essentially replicate when I'm holding the camera, or if I'm directing someone who's holding the camera. And with photography, especially film photography, I just haven't had as much time with it. And to make another point, so much of my time has been spent sort of with the freedom of movement, shooting in public, street photography, or it's like cityscape photography. Other than going like into private property and trespassing or something to get a photo,
it's the best kind of photography.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Kidding. I feel relatively free to move where I want, and that I have sort of this thing I can go back on, which is, hey, you're in public. Like, I understand you're upset. I mean, no disrespect. I really liked this moment that you were this or that or whatever, but like, I'm not doing anything wrong. Whereas in that courtroom, I'm like, am I doing something wrong? If I go over here, is that wrong? Is like the judge going to snap at me? Is he going to stop the ceremony to tell me like, oh, you can't be over there, or I don't want to be in the photo? And like, you just imprison yourself in this listening to fear.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes, we used to joke about this in the rock industry, like working on tour and all that stuff, because we would never have our backstage passes with us. They give them to you. And my buddy Nick would always be, just act like you belong here.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, obviously you do, but if there's any part of you that's like, oh, I don't have this, or like they smell it on you, they can sense it. Just walk through like you belong here. And guess what? Every single time,
99% of the time.
And that doesn't mean that the security staff wasn't like doing their job. It just means, especially because they see you throughout the week or whatever.
A lot of times, like, I don't know, what's a good example? Oh, so this is a weird example.
Yeah.
But, you know, a couple of years ago, I started getting into whiskey.
Yeah.
And I noticed that after about a year of kind of learning about it and starting to do whatever, like every bar I went to, I stopped getting carded.
Yeah.
And I mean, part of that might just be, you know, I look older, but
Yep.
a lot of people do say I look younger.
Yeah.
But it's just like when you go in and you're like, hey, I want this. Do you guys have this?
Yep.
Or like you just have that level of confidence.
Yep.
Because it's not false confidence or
No.
false bravado, but
And it's not
just,
arrogance. It's
not
just
arrogance. It's just like, hey,
like,
do you guys
yeah,
have this?
right.
Then there's like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, they know it. Yeah, knows what they're looking for. Knows what they're. It's like the same kind of principle.
Right.
Just like, you know, if you're like, hey, I don't know if I can,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
but
And
get
that,
in there and just do what you need to do.
and that's certainly been a part of my life, you know, healthy confidence in a lot of areas. And then in areas where I'm not as confident, I can really listen to the fear and like be clinging to that bathtub in the hurricane. I'm just like, you know, sometimes I'm like trying to mask that that's what's going on.
Yeah.
But like people can feel energy, like they know.
Oh, 100%.
They know. And
It's like animals. Like
Yeah.
you have people that are afraid of dogs
Right.
or something. It's like,
Yeah.
just act not afraid. And they're just like, okay. And the dogs are just like, this person's
Right.
not having a good time. Like,
and that's too where like just in human interaction, I think in art too, it's like when there's a truth that's there, but then like something is being managed on top of it.
yeah.
Whether
God,
it's-
what a segue we're making here.
You know, good dude. Whether
What a segue.
it's out to dinner with friends and maybe friends that you don't know as well, you know them tangentially or they're whatever, and you're just like, you want that feeling, and this is what we had when we first met, you want that feeling like you've known this person your whole life. Well, people say that
Yeah.
because when they're with that person, they are just feeling that person's true self. And that's not to say that when I met you or you met me or other situations, there isn't some self-management going on.
Yeah.
But it's nothing where you are crafting an artifice, you know, a false storefront behind what's really there, you know. And sorry for these whatever bad analogies, but
metaphor day.
I'm inarticulate today. I think like almost like the more worked up I get, sort of the more my like the emotion. I don't know. I'm pointing my brain for emotion, but the emotion happens, and like the words just
This artifice,
struggle.
huh?
Yeah.
Emotion.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that, you know, and like you joked about the transition, and that really plays into the second part of this conversation. And sorry for every once in a while when I listen back to our podcast, I'm like, ooh, I wish they would have gone into this a little bit more. Before we transition to this, is there anything? Are we good? Do you feel like we're good on the first part of it?
I think so. I
think so,
mean,
too.
yeah, it's, you know, I think I respect how you look at the situation. I think people could learn from just like the reflection part of it, and nothing's going to change if you don't sit back and reflect on it. I was telling you in the pre-show how I've been spending a lot of time thinking about like quality control.
Yeah.
And quality control is a result of reflection and refinement over time. And I think that, I mean, just you sitting there at home and being like, okay, like, you know that you didn't get the result you wanted.
Yeah.
But a lot of people in my experience will just stop there.
Yeah.
And they'll get emotional about it.
Yep.
And they'll react, and there'll be a spiked tension for a period of time, and then that'll dissipate, and then you're back to normal.
Yeah.
Back to baseline. The baseline hasn't changed. And so you're just setting up for another spike.
Right.
Or you can change the baseline and prevent future spikes.
Right.
Yeah, I think that that's something that I have a lot of respect for, the idea of you like going back and just sitting and working through it. I think that's, if there's anything, you know, great to take out of it outside of the artistic level of just like, hey, what is the true,
Yeah.
you know, what is true about this moment, and how can you represent that with four walls?
Yeah.
It would be, reflecting on situations. So, yeah.
And I think too, the reflection, deploying self-awareness, but then I also think about talking to myself like I might my daughters when they're beating themselves up about something or frustrated about something.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean coddling or, you'll get it next time or, whatever. But it just means like, look, this is what happened. These are the forces at play.
Yeah.
These are your, I don't want to say issues, but these are your things that you're managing or trying to surrender to a little bit from your past or just your personality, your stronger traits and your less strong traits. Like let yourself off the hook a little bit, do better the next time.
Yeah,
like hold yourself accountable and do better the next
Absolutely.
time. But like, it sounds corny, but like just love that person that was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And shine that light on them so that when they,
and it almost, when you reframe it in a way like that, experiences where you may have in your mind, like lacked or had, not kind of lived up to the quote unquote expectation that you had in your mind. If you are able to reframe it in that way, and then suddenly you're able to look at this situation as just something that you grew from.
right.
Like it's a very
Yes.
positive thing. And then when you
It's a
revisit
net.
in your head, it's not a toxic relationship to that concept.
Right.
It's a very positive
Yeah.
thing. There's this guy. So I go to the Y in Omaha a lot. I just doxed myself
Oh, you're screwed,
for
dude.
all of our 100
You're
viewers.
screwed.
No.
You're
So I'll
gonna
go to the Y, and I tell Audrey about this. For like the last year, there's this guy, and usually the TV stays on ESPN. I have some big theories on. I think we need to keep, when you're in a locker room, I think ESPN should almost just be the only option.
Yes.
Like just leave it on ESPN.
Yep.
It's very, and ESPN knows this. They know they are the go-to source of airport entertainment
That's
and
right.
locker room entertainment around the world.
Yep.
They keep it tight.
Yep.
Not like a huge ESPN fan or something, but there's this guy, and he always changes it to CNN, and then he leaves.
Yep.
And it's like the most offensive thing to
Yeah.
me. I'm just like,
Lighting a match.
yeah, like you're turning CNN on, which like any cable news should be banned in any public place. Like that is my
Especially like oil change places. I'm so tired of it.
oh, turn that shit
Turn it
off. And so he does this all the time, and every time he does it, I complain to Audrey. I'm like, this fucking guy is turning it on
guy.
CNN. He's dropping a match in gasoline and then leaving.
Yep, I'm out.
And he just leaves, turns the volume up.
Have
And so
fun,
I
you
always go
bastards.
over and like turn the TV off.
Yeah.
I can't take it. Especially like that is my time to kind of decompress from the day, like sit in the sauna for, 20, 30 minutes, think. I don't have a phone. You can't take a phone in there.
Yep.
Sometimes I'll read, but sometimes I just sit there and just, think. And it's really nice and it's quiet. And then in the locker room, like ESPN is white noise. It might as well be white noise. But CNN is just like, you might as well just drill into my brain. But yesterday I was talking to Audrey about this idea, and this relates, I promise. It seems left field.
Yep.
But
Hang in there, everyone.
Reframing the situation. But I was talking to Audrey about it, and I was just like, what if this guy is just doing this as a joke? Do you know how fucking funny that would be? To just go in, turn it on CNN and leave.
Let's see. Yep.
That's hilarious to
Yes.
me. That's the funniest thing you could do. And like, so then I'm like thinking about like what channel would be even more like even
Subversive.
funnier than CNN. But no, and I was just observing that phenomenon in the car last night. I'm like, now, like I choose to kind of look at that now as like every time he does it, he's doing it on purpose. And it's just hilarious to me.
Yep.
So now every time, I mean, obviously this just had this like thought a couple of days ago, but now every time I'm in there and it gets flipped on CNN, I'm just going to laugh and like go on with my evening. And it's such a more positive way to deal with that situation than to be like, this fucking guy,
That's
just
right.
CNN, and nothing's changed.
Right.
Nothing about the core.
Your interpretation of his intention is what has changed.
Yeah, exactly.
And you went from a dark intention to something,
or just like not even like dark, not
just
even
sort
like it's
of
a dark intention, but just like something that causes me to feel frustrated.
Yeah.
Into something that causes me to feel
delight.
Delight.
Almost,
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
actually borderline,
Right.
delight. And, I think the same goes for reframing. Yeah, you can have this very toxic mentality of dealing with a situation.
So, in our first days of acting school, our chairman of the acting department, Henson, got us, we were all in the room, freshmen, like brand new class
Yeah.
of 15 actors ready to engage in theater. And I think the other theater students were there, like theater studies and the technical stuff in theater. And the faculty's all there, and he leads up to this phrase that he used, and I still use it to this day. We are going to be coaching you.
Yeah.
We're going to be directing you. We're going to be telling you maybe something you're doing wrong. Let's like you're breaking a rule, like
Yeah.
you can't do this because it's safety or this or that, or you're not embracing the technique like we intend you to. Blah blah blah. Sometimes our tactics or the way that you think we're telling you this
Yeah.
may come off as harsh, abrasive,
Yeah.
whatever. We are here to help you be as excellent as you can be. We are all invested in your excellence. So he uttered the phrase, so everything that we say, everything that we do, assume benevolence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't assume malevolence.
100%.
And I have carried that phrase with me my
Yeah.
whole life when I'm in a situation
Yep.
where my first read of it is, this fucking guy.
Son of a bitch. Yeah.
I go, assume benevolence.
Yep. Well, and
They are not they are not choosing malevolence.
yeah.
And while some people might, there's this is a whole separate thing, but there often is, there's a positive intention even if the outcome or the tactics they use feel negative,
Yeah.
harsh, hurtful, whatever.
And I think there's extremes to that too. I've been reading about and listening to, the Plot Thickens, which is TCM's podcast,
Yeah.
and they do annual seasons. And right now they're doing John Ford.
Oh, nice.
And so I've been reading a little bit about John Ford on the back end of things too. I'm a big John Ford fan.
Yeah.
And the podcast has been really good. And then they mentioned Kubrick, who we've talked about on the podcast before. But these directors who would use like a bit of a psychological manipulation. And
Yeah.
I mean, there was an instance that they talked about on the most recent episode, Hitchcock. Oh, 100% Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Well, like Hitchcock replacing, the birds and the birds with real birds.
Right.
Or like John Ford, they talked about, there's a dialogue between an actress and a black actor. And, he's over here telling the black guy who's doing the scene, like, hey, she's kind of racist.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And, the actress who's performing the scene with him, like, not at all.
Right.
Not at all. But that,
Yep.
you know,
What does that do?
and it's funny because the actress was like, he didn't trust me
Yeah.
to deliver what needed to be delivered.
Yep.
You know, again, you're framing the situation, and that intent is usually felt.
Absolutely.
Like, when you're, and this actually segues great into what we're going into, but
We promise we're going to get to the YouTube part.
yeah.
Hang in there.
But you know, he's trying to have, and Kubrick did this all the time, where he'd be
Yes.
like, "Hey, I'm sorry, like I know she made that comment that you're a piece of shit," but or like, you know, just making these
Yeah.
drama situations up to where you're reading a scene with somebody and
Yep.
that's shining through,
Yeah.
and the camera feels it. When they say like the camera feels everything, like I don't think that's a hyperbolic statement.
Yeah.
I think it's just, it picks up on what's happening
Yeah.
pretty well typically, or the camera doesn't lie.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, a lot of these directors would, and some people think that's going too far. Some people think that's just part of the craft.
Yeah.
I think you can go too far, but it kind of, you know, assume benevolence is a version of that.
Right.
Where it's like, they're just trying to get the best out of you. And I think if you do that with strangers,
Yeah.
you're typically, that's the best, going to lead to the best psychological mindset. But it's also interesting that we kind of have a nose for,
Yeah.
you know, the fact that they are psychologically manipulating, be like, hey, this person doesn't like you, but you're gonna have to do this scene.
Yeah.
So you're doing the scene, you're like in the back of your mind, you're like, this stupid son of a bitch doesn't like me. He's lying right to my face right now. Like I bet they can't wait to get out of this scene. And then that gets into perfectly, we've been obsessed with these old YouTube videos of people just completely. How would you describe it? Unaware, but not. That sounds negative. I don't want to frame it negatively, but just.
Well, I think this comes with intention and definitely artifice and sort of like crafting something for some impure outcome. And by impure, I mean like, oh, if I follow the YouTube playbook and like put all this shit on my video and like do what they all did, I'm going to get what they have, whether it's subscriber count, revenue, whatever. Like you lose the magical thing that had you even think about making a YouTube video in the first place. So there's some people that go, this would make a really good YouTube video. But then they do their research, right? Like, okay, well, how do you do this? Because they care about when they put their thing out there that it appears to be well made or well crafted or whatever. So they might go, well, this YouTuber does slow-mo and this one does this and this one does this. And they start collecting all these tools for how to make a video. Yeah. And then they start seeing, well, I just watched these videos on how to have your channel blow up, how to hit 1,000 subscribers as quickly as possible. They start bringing in all this bullshit. Yeah. And then that magical thing that was an impulse, a desire, and an inspiration to make something gets completely overshadowed by something that's fake, in my opinion.
So do you think the camera doesn't lie? Just to kind of piggyback off of that point, because you're still recording yourself doing something. Do you think is it you've become such a good actor that you can lie to the camera? Is it that the marketplace doesn't care if you're lying? Maybe they're in on it. Yeah. Or is it that? Yeah. What do you think it's?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, some of the best.
Because I think 100% agree, and you see things where you're just like, this is completely authentic. Right. And you feel it. Right. And you see other things, and you're just like, this is kind of bullshit. Yeah. But why is it that the kind of bullshit is the stuff that gets massive commercial appeal if it is such bullshit? Which is interesting.
And I think that's because there have been hundreds of generations of storytellers and human interaction and the dissection of human psychology and how we react to propaganda and what public relations does to us and what headlines in the National Enquirer do well, what words in the English language trigger an immediate emotional response when you read them, what imagery, what type of imagery, what thumbnail, whatever. You can figure out what it is that makes a human being instinctively react to whatever they're reading, seeing, and then watching.
It's like crowdsourced manipulation.
Yeah, and there's just truths of what we are susceptible to. Mm-hmm. And the savviest of us, from the high-end public relations firms that are working with all the biggest companies in the world, government agencies, institutions, whatever, and this isn't, I'm not trying to get into
yeah, I mean, just
like mass manipulation of people, even though I think that does happen.
The advertising industry.
Like we know what works. And sometimes people come up with something that's playing with the foundation that's been laid, but they change one thing or they change a couple things and it feels like it's something entirely new. Maybe, the famous Apple 1984 ad from 1984, or some of the Nike commercials, or some print ads. You know, we watched Mad Men, and you know what it was like to watch some of those scenes where he pitches his idea for avocados or for Kodak camera or whatever. It's effective, right? So I think sometimes YouTubers can kind of figure that out. They read the books, they watch the videos. I mean, I read a book, David Ogilvy book, you know, sort of one of the inspirations for Mad Men and Don Draper. And he basically distills down everything he learned in his career
Ogilvy
advertising.
on advertising.
About what headlines are good and how much copy you should have, like negative space on the page, like all this stuff. And if you're savvy, you can take that stuff and use it for not nefarious purposes, but for more commercial outcomes. You know, the movie studios do this. Like, what ingredients have to be in the movie?
Well, you're optimizing for the thing that you think is the best.
Yeah, or you're optimizing
Again,
for the things you care about.
Assume benevolence.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
You're optimizing for the things that benefit.
Yeah, and they want, you know, we want money, we want box office results, you know, all that stuff. And, you know, the box office this year has been pretty tumultuous. You've got, you know, Fall Guy not doing very well. Then you have Inside Out 2, just, you know, breaking records. And then you have, you know, Kevin Costner's Horizon. The first film basically bombed. They're pushing the release date for the second film beyond August to see what it can do to pick up some steam on VOD. All this stuff.
I want to see that.
The biggest thing for me is I just
then I saw it was like 3 hours, and I'm like, that's going to be tough.
And that was the biggest thing too. And that was that's another thing. How long is your video on YouTube, and what is that sweet spot that makes people go, oh yeah, eight? I think about 8.5 minutes is sort of like, if it's a good thumbnail and a nice title, and then you deliver on the promise, an 8.5 minute video is about the sweet spot for most people.
Statistically, we'll do better than
yeah. But I have videos that are 22, 23 minutes long and have shitty thumbnails, and I'm just sitting there talking to the camera. And while they don't, you know, go viral.
So if we're using that, I guess, then idea that people do have noses for this.
Yeah.
Typically, like, this is kind of bullshit. This is bullshit. This is not bullshit.
Yes.
Which I do think, and I think now it's better than ever because just sheer exposure therapy.
Yeah.
Most people can kind of tell when they're being put on.
Right.
Being naive about a subject is seen as like a great disadvantage in any social situation, I feel like.
Yep.
So people have this just culturally right now at this current point in time. People have this like fear of missing out, and they need to have all this. So through all of that, I do think people have pretty good noses for when something isn't authentic. I want to try to be precise with the language, but
do you also feel, because I do, but do you also feel that there's such a glut of inauthentic content that the demand for
is higher than it's ever been?
Is just currently exceptionally high?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's probably higher than it's ever been.
Yeah.
I mean, exceptionally high, sure, but the higher than it's ever been is a statement that sounds outrageous, but if you think about it, we're only dealing with a 15-year period here.
Right.
Like, I mean, if we're being completely honest, I mean, even YouTube has been around for, 2005, so barely.
And not even close to sort of, not what YouTube is now, but sort of like what YouTube is, which is people making videos and putting them on the internet.
But we're literally just about to hit 20 years of like that. And so we're not talking, like, when I say it's like the highest it's ever been, that's not trying to be, again, not trying to be hyperbolic, but it is just saying, like, in the 20-year period, we started out, we started optimizing, and again, like you said, like YouTube thumbnail or YouTube title is literally just copyright from a magazine.
That's right.
So maybe you are going back to late 19th century, and printed, like, copy
headlines,
and things like that, and you propaganda in World
copy.
War I, move that forward. So, but I mean, still, you're dealing with 120 years.
Yep.
And at least in our current understanding. So I do think that, people are more savvy about it than they've ever been in the entire period. And a lot of that is due to the absolute influx that we've seen in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a big hunger for it. But what's going to happen, because this is what always happens, and you're starting to see markets get served. it's a market.
Yeah.
When a new market comes up, there's always somebody waiting to exploit that market.
Right.
So what happens when the market is authenticity? You're going to see a bunch of it's a paradox. You're going to see people try to serve the authenticity market.
That's right.
And by way of serving that market, you're going to see a lot of that authenticity go away.
Right.
So how does that?
Because
What does
when
that
you're
look
trying
like?
to be
is
authentic,
the question that I'm trying to. Yeah, is what I'm trying to fight
authenticity
with.
gets the money, subscribers, the community,
Yeah.
the strength of community that we all as brands or YouTubers or whoever, whatever it is that's trying to exploit that market.
And I think there will be people that will get big, like large followings, with original thinking and actual authenticity. And there always are. Like there are plenty of people right now with massive followings who I have tremendous, and this is YouTube and non-YouTube, massive followings, and they're very authentic and true to themselves.
And they could have
So it's
more
not-
massive followings if they started doing the playbook and following the formula.
Well, you
But
could even argue that there's audiences right now, or people who have audiences right now that are way bigger than, historical markers would suggest that are bucking the playbook.
Yes.
Or just like, not for me.
Right.
And that's why.
Yeah.
But that's more the exception than the rule.
Right.
And it's always been. And there's always going to be people like that.
Yeah.
That's how trends change and new ideas are presented. And then all those ideas, when they are presented to the marketplace, some of them do better than others. And then whoever it is trying to just literally exploit the marketplace is going to go and try to exploit those ideas.
Yep.
But it's just interesting because, we are reaching a point where authenticity is becoming the measure.
Yeah.
So what happens? What does that look
becoming
like?
a major ingredient in the recipe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are people that know that, and they're trying to create authenticity. Like, I'm going to make authenticity. Well, you don't really make authenticity. That's the exact opposite of what
like
it
you
is,
sent
right?
me that MTV documentary where it's
the cool chasers or whatever.
The Merchants of Cool.
Merchants of Cool, yeah. I'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah, it's just like, they're trying to be like, well, if you do this, it's cooler.
Like, hey, Sprite sales are shit, so we want to get a team of marketing professionals to do like 6 months of research to figure out what the angle with Sprite is. And I won't spoil the outcome, but it's just fascinating how all that works. And it makes you a little, this is back in what was this, the 90s?
90s, early 2000s,
Yeah.
MTV era, like late MTV era.
This is the stuff that makes you go, oh, like all that was going on behind the scenes to like
talking about like Limp Bizkit,
get me to like Sprite, how they put Sprite in the hip hop community because that was really surging.
Yeah,
and try to use those emerging markets or growing cultural movements to throw product in there to ride the coattails of it.
Yep.
And so what you're saying is essentially that, like, so authentic YouTube, the channels that are like really authentic.
Grunge. Look at grunge. Like we've seen small scale examples of what this looks like.
Yeah.
When you corporatize authenticity,
right?
Or I have that
commercialize
the
it.
Book, The Conquest of Cool about like the flower power movement and the hippie movement being kind of co-opted by advertising.
Yep.
It lost its effectiveness. I mean, we've just gone through a period where we've seen a lot of social causes get hijacked by corporations trying to turn it into more money. And what did it do? It eventually kills the concept.
Yeah.
Like it eventually kills the purpose of the movement. Like any kind of altruistic intent or, possible, quality outcome gets hijacked for commercial gain. I'm saying that like it's when something becomes commercial, I don't necessarily agree with, like, there's a lot of good people, good authentic people who are probably going to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
As this movement kind of crashes and starts to, dissipate out into the culture.
But again, it goes back to what we've talked about before, the hierarchy of intentions. When you have somebody making something because they care about the thing they're making, it's Artifact Bag Company, it's Patagonia, it's some of these channels that we're going to talk about. When their first intention is to do that earnest, simple, authentic thing, communicate something, give you their point of view, tell you what this unique perspective they have in a video essay about The Shining or William Eggleston or whatever it is. You watch that stuff and you go, like, I'm being told the truth right now.
Yeah.
And this person is making money, and they know they can make money if they keep doing that, but they are never betraying their desire to communicate this thing or make this thing. That's always the first priority.
If there's anything that's different about this moment in time as opposed to the last 150 years, where you did have this parasitic, like, thing that attached itself to these movements and then embodied these, like, vectors of the movement. And, like, I mean, you had advertising and corporations that were literally just parasitic.
Yeah.
And then they'd come in and basically say, you need us in order to do what you need to do. If there is anything that's different about this, is you can have a laptop and manage everything you need.
Right.
You can, it's easier to kind of take it all in-house, for lack of a better word. And that's the one thing that I think could protect against that a little bit. So maybe you see some of these parasitic, companies or tendencies die out if another wave of authenticity comes through. Because, you have plenty of people out there that are just creating things because they're just telling their truth to the world.
That's right.
And like, they make bags because they want to make the best bags.
Yep. They make airplanes because they want to make the best airplanes.
Who's that? What
Boeing.
company is that?
Boeing started out like carrying. There's a couple documentaries out, but there was one in particular, and I'll try to link it in the show notes. I don't remember the title.
Sounds like propaganda.
But they just went so deep into, but it wasn't even like from Boeing's point of view. And, I don't know for sure where it came from, but they just talked so much about the Boeing, the sort of post World War II Boeing and what they were about and their quality standards and how.
If I was doing marketing for Boeing, I would say we need to make some documentaries on how much they cared. And then we need to hire a new CEO that goes, we've strayed from that, and we will do everything to get back to that. Give them metric, and then there you go.
Yeah, but that to me has been the example of a company that was doing something. Their main priority was to build the safest airplanes in the world, to have the long view on their corporate outlook. If we put every resource we have in quality control, safety, scrutiny of the materials, working with our manufacturing partners, or keeping it all in-house, whatever their principles were, we're going to build the best aircraft in the world, and everybody is going to make us our top choice because they trust us. We're the sure thing. We're the no-brainer.
Yeah.
And then they got bought out, and that company wanted to capitalize on that brand and increase profits and all that stuff. And I'm oversimplifying it, but the hierarchy of intentions shifted. It shifted from let's make the best airplanes in the world. And because we make the best airplanes in the world, we're going to be very profitable. Maybe not as profitable as we could be, but we're going to be very profitable. Let's make, let's make some good airplanes.
Yeah.
Let's make a crap ton of money.
Yeah, let's make as much money as we can.
And that's what we're talking about with these channels, right? We are starved for a connection.
Well, and also, like, just that's what YouTube, that's where it shines.
Yes.
When you can watch a guy's video who lives in Alaska or, on the other side of the United States or in South America or in Australia or, in Russia, or you can watch somebody's video from the other side of the world and know that person.
Yeah.
On like an intimate level.
Yes.
Like know what they're thinking about, what they're concerned about. Know them on a human level. Like me and you sitting down every week here and talking. I mean, you had this experience. You talked to my buddy today, and he was like, I feel like I know you.
Yeah.
You've never met him before until you just talked. Yeah.
That's right.
Like, that's where this is special. It's where these things and podcasts and YouTube videos and channels, that's where it shines. And that's what the promise of the whole internet thing was in the first place was, free access to information and
community.
Community.
Yeah.
and it got co-opted a little bit there.
Yeah. Well, the commercial aspect and the ability to make money or to build an empire, those things can yield great results, and people can have very fulfilling lives by deploying their talent, their creativity, their knowledge and expertise on kind of cracking the code or figuring out the formula or whatever it is at the end of the day. And I think that there are a lot of people making content on YouTube that come from a place of business and capitalism and entrepreneurial instincts and all that stuff. And they have good intentions. They are benevolent people. They want to build an audience. They want to build an empire, whatever it is that they want to do. And certainly sometimes some of those tactics can be questionable. How much are you manipulating people psychologically? What things are you deploying in order to get sort of maybe a vain or egocentric or materialistic result? And you really have to watch out for that.
Yeah.
I have rejected a lot of that content, and the more polished and sort of formulaic and playbooky it is, obviously the less I want to watch it. And I find myself gravitating towards these channels that typically have not very many subscribers. It's somebody sitting in front of the camera talking about something that I'm interested in or something that I'm becoming interested in. And we are just hanging out. I feel like I'm hanging out.
Yeah.
With that person.
There's so many good sub communities. We were talking about this before. There's so many good sub communities.
I mean,
I listed off like 15 of them that I unplugged into.
Yeah.
You're plugged into 15 others.
Yeah.
30 others.
Right. And some of mine overlap with yours, like typewriters, photography, of course, things like that. And, I'll sit there and watch a 22-minute video I just did about a photography YouTuber talking about an Epson scanner that like burp, 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 scans printed photos like one every second. And it was like 20 minutes. I'm like, oh, down the road, I might, something like that might be good to whatever. And, the price and all that. I'm like, but I just like you. You've got a good vibe. You've got a good energy. And I can just feel, and this is, again, like the word of the decade, I can feel your authenticity. You are just here because you had an honest, simple moment of inspiration to talk about this printer. So you made a video about it.
You're not trying to sell me anything. You're not trying to, you're not trying to get me to buy into your way of seeing things.
Right.
There's not
indoctrinating me.
Yeah. It's just sitting down and having a conversation with a buddy in the park.
Telling your friends what cool thing you figured out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the channels that you showed me during pre-show, is that a tattoo?
It's a
stamp.
Temporary tattoo.
Okay, I was gonna say, oh, that's legit.
Yeah. Audrey and I both did like a little ghost.
That's really cool.
But she was like, "Just get a tattoo," and I was like, "I'm not doing a tattoo until I see it for a little bit."
Yep. So when you
that's a subculture I haven't jumped into yet. Is
temporary
tattoo subculture.
But yeah, when you find those channels and you're like, now some of those channels can have a lot of craft to them. They can have flashy editing, really good lighting. And I don't mean flashy editing in some inauthentic way, but maybe that's their comedic style. Yeah. Or that's their voice as someone who, and how they communicate.
There are some channels on there, and the same goes for film photography. The ones that I followed the most are the ones that are more vloggy, late 2000s style.
Yeah.
Where it's just somebody sitting, and like some of them are in black and white, some of them have like classical music intros or just whatever, like
old camcorder.
Yeah, and it's just like, but you can tell like it's produced.
Yeah.
Well.
Right.
Like they spent a few minutes in the editing software. Yeah. Some of these guys are just record.
Yeah.
You see the thumb coming down at the start, and you see the thing at the end where the hand is.
Yeah,
camera falls down in the middle, and they pick it back up, and like some of these things are raw,
right?
But all of them have their own little charm to it.
Yeah.
But the thread is, and I'm looking at the form. You're looking at the form. We're kind of dissecting like you put this into words, and it resonated. But you said you're looking at why this works.
Yeah.
And like you're seeing why this works. But the biggest thing, like, yes, there are reasons, but the biggest one, and this is the thing that people are like, oh, it's just simple. You just click record and do it, and then it'll be good. But no, these people have an original perspective.
Right.
They're not just repeating nonsense.
Yep.
Like, you see this all the time where you see a video will blow up of somebody talking.
Yep.
And
4 million views.
4 million, and it blows
the
up.
Number one thing I learned.
And so then you see a bunch of people trying to replicate that, and they're like doing this just like they're chat GPTing, or they're looking for just repeat something that somebody else has already said. They have no original thoughts. They have no original anything. It's just complete regurgitation of shit.
Yep.
And they try to copy the form of the video. And it's like, no, the form is great, and you can dissect that. But the reason that these things are working at their core, because it's authentic.
Yep.
It's original enough to where you're listening to it and you're like, I haven't thought about that before. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Pete, we love that as humans. When you get to talk to another human or read from another human and be like, that's interesting. I have a great Harold Bloom bookmark. I have no idea what book it's in. Might be one sitting over there. But I'm going to butcher it. But essentially, it's like, I enjoy reading because I like finding, thoughts that are way more original than my own.
Absolutely.
Or like, that's the joy of reading. It's like,
Yeah.
I think it goes beyond reading. Like, that's what we're looking for when we're watching films, when we're looking at people do vlogs on YouTube,
vlogs.
when we're reading.
I haven't thought of it that way.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
You're looking for that. Exactly. I haven't seen that. I've never looked at it that way.
Yeah.
I've never thought. We love that.
Yep.
That is like the best feeling in the world to just. It's like something unlocks. You get
That's
another
exactly
branch
right.
on the
That's
tree
right.
that
That's
suddenly.
exactly right. Yep.
The door in the video game that was locked
Yep.
off until now opens, and you're like, whoa.
Well, and
I haven't explored this one yet.
And I just had that. Channel member video I made this morning, sitting in front of a Canon HD camcorder at my desk, just speaking for about 15 minutes about a couple of things to update channel members on what's going on with my channel. But I brought out the Technopoly book and read a couple passages, and I said, these passages, even if it wasn't this profound reorganization of my mind, these passages really kind of articulated something that you kind of always knew, but you just didn't quite have the words for it.
Yeah.
So sharing that with my audience to say, if you're someone that is in a similar place where you're feeling these things or wondering about these things, this may be a good book for you to read. And it's just, take a look at this.
There's no pretense. It's just, this is what I'm interested in right now.
Right.
Maybe you're interested in it too.
Now, I will say, there are a lot of videos out there that are very authentic. And they are very hard to watch.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
that's
the videos that you showed me,
yeah.
can we dispatch our critical eye and go, these people have a baseline of talent and skill that they're bringing to YouTube because they've sat around campfires and told stories.
Yep.
They've sat at the dinner table and
and
communicated.
I like that you're clarifying this point because this is exactly where I wanted to go with it.
Yep.
Like, I think, and I kind of prefaced this before, they have original thoughts.
Yes.
They have thought. Like, the prerequisite is they have sat and contended with ideas.
Right.
And they constantly do it. All of them are the same in that regard. Like, when I say it's authentic content, they're looking at the world in a unique way. Yeah. And they're sharing that. Yeah. Like, you can make something that is authentic to you, but I loved you titled one of the podcasts a couple of weeks ago. You said, "If you're bored, you're bored, you're boring."
That's right. Which is a lyric from a song.
What is it?
Yeah. From, if you're bored, then you're boring.
I don't know if I know the song.
I think it's called Flagpole Sitta is the name of the song. Sitta. I always forget the musician, but I'll put it in the show notes.
Great though. Yeah.
If you're bored, then you're boring.
I think it's like it.
Yeah.
A lot of people just don't have, and part of that is because, like, I do think it is the easiest way to do things or to approach the world, especially now. Like, this is why consumerism is so popular.
Yep.
Is to just kind of jump in line with like a very narrow sphere of information and to just, swim in that stream. It's easy. It's constantly evolving.
Yep.
Generally you're going to find a portion of the bell curve that is interested and willing to talk about these topics. You still you scratch that itch to communicate with another human.
Yep.
But it's boring.
Yep.
And there's typically so many people talking about it. It's National Enquirer. You're talking about what's in the National Enquirer. It's got a big audience. You can absolutely, but it's not that interesting.
Yeah.
Everybody's contended with it already. And I think, comparing like YouTube pipe community members to like Stanley Kubrick is a bit of a stretch, but I'm going to do it.
He's going to do it. Bring it on home, buddy.
No, I love listening. I listened to this was a couple of years ago. Louis C.K. did like a podcast on Stanley Kubrick, and he was talking about why Stanley Kubrick was so interesting. And Louis has a very original voice too in his comedy. I think there's a reason why he's so well regarded in the comedy world. But he's talking about why Stanley Kubrick, and he's like, this guy's literally an alien. You watch any one of his films, and it's like seeing the world that you live in and contend with on a daily basis through an alien's eyes.
Yeah.
And it's so unique to his, and and that's kind of what you gotta have some original thoughts. It's not just, you can't just be like, I'm gonna sit down and make authentic content.
Right.
You've got to actually just contend with things a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think the best of that community, they're, contending with it. And it might, you don't have to contend with the world's issues. You don't have to make 2001: A Space Odyssey to make an interesting YouTube pipe community video, or like a running community video, or, film photography or typewriting video. But you're listening to them and you're hearing something that is, it deviates from the norm a little bit.
Right.
And that's...
Yeah, you're hearing a stance. You're hearing a unique perspective. You're hearing someone that experienced something and has
that actually
good constructive criticism.
Exactly. Or like hearing a stance is great, because it's like a lot of times you're hearing a stance and then they discuss why they take that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times if on just about anything, you might not agree with it, but if somebody sits down and they say, this is what I think, and here's the logic to how I got here,
a thesis,
if they've put the time together to come up with a defense for the thesis, a lot of the time, and this isn't the case for everything, but a lot of the time you're going to be like, oh, I can see exactly how you got there.
Yeah.
You still might not agree with it, but majority of the time, it's like, oh, I see how you got there.
And I think that like our episodes where we come in hot with something, where we have a stance, and we might have a thesis, and maybe we don't have a perfectly crafted defense of it, but we're volleying back and forth with a challenge to that thesis, or agreeing on it and unpacking different defenses between us of that kind of thesis, versus episodes where I remember, kind of talking about Technopoly before I had finished reading it. And I'm like, I don't feel equipped right now to really have a stance on this. I'm still figuring it out. And so that episode, while it might be interesting for some core viewers, isn't going to be as interesting to a wider audience, because I'm or we on a different subject are working through something. Like we don't know yet. And there is something interesting about that process, but there's something certainly much more dramatic about thesis, defense, and then argument. A debate, really.
Debate.
Even if it's not heated, and which we certainly don't do.
I think I think debate is so over-indexed in our current rendition of culture. Yeah, like I think people just want to sit down and listen and not have an opinion on things. A lot of times. And I think that's what's like, I know that's what's great to me about a lot of the YouTube pipe community stuff, is I can just sit down and listen. Yeah. Or, especially with film photography channels and things like that. And some of them are like actually like sensory, like ASMR sensory. And that
goes
very satisfying. That's
some of your pipe guys with their voices,
voice cadence,
their accent. Like I was mesmerized by just the one gentleman's deep Southern. Yeah. Like it was just a beautiful song to listen to.
Absolutely.
And then if it's rhythmic, poetic.
Absolutely.
And so those are some of the things I'm talking about too when it comes to just an authentic impulse isn't always enough. Yeah. Because if you have bad audio, if your framing is uncomfortable, if there are other things that are beyond your control. It could be the sound of your voice. It could be other things that
I do think
give
though,
friction to
like,
experiencing your video.
I agree with that less now than I would have a couple of years ago, because I do think the content is the most important thing.
100%.
Now. Like you can, you could be Stephen Hawking.
Yes.
And if you're talking about some shit that people care about, people are going to pay attention.
Well, for RFK, for example.
100%.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
Ben Shapiro on the other side of things.
Yeah.
His, I don't want to start getting.
I don't want
to start getting into criticizing people's voices. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like.
No, but it is.
But
squeaky,
his voice is less pleasing to my ear. Than Sam Elliott, or the gentleman from the pipe video you showed me.
Yeah.
Like there are some aesthetic qualities to things, whether it's visually or orally, that are a warm blanket that wraps you up, in addition to the authenticity,
and
in addition to the ability to communicate
and
more clearly and concisely.
It's also a differentiator.
Yeah.
Like,
true.
Like you could play a clip of, RFK is a great example. You could play a clip of RFK and anybody who's heard him is going to be like, I know who that is.
Struggle, yeah.
And some people might be like, oh, that's a turnoff, but it's like having we use the same intro in every one of our videos.
Right.
I'm sure there's some people
Yes.
who have been listening. There's probably a couple of people who have been listening for a year who they have heard that 52 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a comforting psychological
Right.
effect. Maybe you were on vacation one time and you watched 3 of our videos, and that is embedded into the experience of your vacation.
That's right.
And so it is a differentiator.
Yeah.
And so, it gets like the content is the most important thing.
Right.
And then, having, which I believe, that's firmly what I believe now more than ever. And I mean, that's a great example of, I found his voice off-putting, and then over time it becomes less, way less. You're listening to what he has to say.
Desensitize is not a good word, but you're sort of, you're the rough edges are rounded.
It's like a
off.
non-factor at some point.
Especially because what he says is so engaging.
That's what I would detach from a little bit in terms of, I think some of these guys have had crap video.
Yeah.
Like, especially in like the YouTube hype community the best is like when you do photography stuff and it's like crap video, and it's like, well, you're making it, but then you hear some of the stuff they're saying and it's like, like the video might look like crap, but this person is like a master at photography.
Right.
Like it is just abundantly clear listening to what they have to say.
And they may just be also a good communicator. They don't have to be some like great storyteller and all that, even if they're not telling a story necessarily, but just communicating something. But I found where I'm like, this guy's really authentic. I love this old camcorder that he's using. Like they're starting to check all the boxes, and I'm 5-10 minutes into the video and I'm like, we're going all over the place here. We're taking long pauses. Your audio's a little rough, or like you're kind of meandering. You're not really staying on track. Like I'm just like, your communication skills are making this difficult to stay focused on.
I wonder if people feel that way about this podcast right now.
And I know that we have episodes that are like that. The hope is with us, and part of why we did this is the cameras don't really. That camera's out, by the way. The cameras don't really affect us. It doesn't, like the judge telling me shoot back behind me. They don't box us in. Like we're not locked down. So the hope for our podcast is, I feel like I'm hanging out with 2 guys that are having a legit conversation at a coffee shop. Yeah. Like these guys are just having a legit conversation, and conversations can be a little messy. They can be a little in and out. They can have a really great segue, but then the guy takes us back 5 minutes. And then we go off to the YMCA and it's like, but then some people, and I think this is where like the right viewers, the people that we're really going to have a good connection with go, that's the magic of it.
Yeah. It's clear, and it's clearly not for everybody. Like the pipe community is perfect example of this. Like, it's rare that any of those guys have more than 10K subs or whatever.
Yeah.
That's not why they do it.
No.
And the audience that is there cares. They are loyal.
Yeah.
These are friends. These are family members.
That's right.
I mean, I showed you one of the guys before we started, and it's like he passed away.
Yeah.
And I mean, thousands of people
Yeah.
came out, like I think there's like tobacco blends dedicated to the guy. Like there's literally a pipe
Legend.
that was released from like a major pipe manufacturer to honor him. I mean,
yeah.
So it's like, you know,
And
you look at it and you're like, he had 15,000 subs at the time, probably 9,000, whatever.
Yeah.
But he had 9,000 people that cared deeply.
But that's that trueness, the purity.
Yeah.
You know, those things are really special. And
Yeah.
and that connection to my photography incident is I got disconnected from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I couldn't get it back.
That's got to be the North Star, right?
Is.
At
And
all
so
times.
You have to listen. You have to rely on your craft, your intention, the objective.
Yep.
And when you are off, what you make is not going to be right. It's not going to be. It's not going to be centered. It's not going to be. It's not going to be authentic.
Just before we close,
but that doesn't mean like with what I did, like my photography, that it was like a lie or it was bullshit. It just was.
Yeah.
It just wasn't in the flow.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, and I think you raise an interesting point that you can have the intention and still miss the mark.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
And that's where craft comes in my instance. Like I had the intention going in. I'm like, I'm going to make photography here.
Is there a craft to authenticity? Is it a practiced skill?
I don't know if there's a craft to authenticity, but I think there's a craft to like laying the foundation for it to happen.
Yeah. Is it simplicity on the other side of mastery, like authenticity on the other side of?
Yeah.
I wonder if our tendency is towards, because I mean, if you think about, especially on the pipe thing, like a lot of these guys, you're like, man, that guy's super. There's plenty of people in there in that community who are inauthentic. It just doesn't attract a lot of that because the audience cap is like 10K. You're huge.
Right.
So there's just like, if you're making videos
Yeah.
and you can't monetize because it's tobacco content.
Right. Yep.
So if you're making videos for any purpose other than communicating, it's disincentive. So it's really a great governor on.
It is.
On just
because
attracting.
That's the corrupting force typically is, wait, I can make money at this?
Yep.
Well, now I'm good. Well, I wouldn't make a video about this, but I can
sell.
It's a
hyper effective, social experiment.
I didn't even think about this.
Isn't that
they can't monetize.
Can't monetize it. So it really kind of walls itself off.
Yeah.
And the people that are going, there's a reason that they've been doing it for 15 years.
Yeah.
It's because they all really just genuinely care about the people in the community.
Yeah.
But what I was getting at is I've seen younger people make videos for that community, and it is kind of you're like, this is not
right.
But
Something's
a lot of
here.
it's like older guys, and I'm not saying that the younger people are doing it like they have some like exploitative impulse or anything. I think it's just going into authenticity as a learned skill. A lot of these guys are older guys,
right?
Like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s even. And they a lot of them just don't care.
Yeah.
They're having a great time. They're like, wow, there's a way that I can talk to people about something that I really am passionate about.
Or I'm trying to find this information out there and it's not out there.
Yeah.
Like I have a perspective and there's things I'm looking for, this stuff with the pipe or that stuff with the cleaning products or that stuff with the tobacco.
Yep.
And every time I go to look for it, to find that person who's going to communicate those things that are important to me, they're not there. So I better do it.
Better do it myself.
And that was my impulse behind my photography channel. I'm like, I just want a channel that isn't any talking. It's ambient, synthy, weird music that just kind of feels good. It's soundscapes, and it's a combination of photo and video for 15 minutes, so I can just like vibe out to it.
People aren't gonna like this, but like, is the prerequisite to authenticity just time? Because it's kind of like you either have it or you don't. And over time, hopefully you
like time draws it out of you.
Maybe. I'm literally thinking through this right now in terms of like authenticity as a result of, I mean, it's life experience, right? It's like,
yes.
I heard this quote the other day from one of the sages on the YouTube Pipe community.
These guys.
And he was just like, he's like, you gain wisdom through experience, but a lot of times the experiences that give you the most wisdom are experiences that you wouldn't choose to go through.
Yeah. Like,
So it's like the
photography
people,
at the wedding, like,
the people, or like losing a loved one or something like that.
Pain, like real serious
Yeah.
pain, trauma.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, so the people who, have the most wisdom have the most pain.
Yeah. Scars.
Yeah. And I just like, obviously we've heard that before. And it's been almost fetishized culturally. But I think there is something to that of like, you have a lot of people that just haven't experienced a lot.
Well, and we've got a lot of people sitting at their desks staring at a blue rectangle
all day.
And I say blue,
wondering why time went
Yeah.
by so quickly.
I call it blue because it's blue light, not
Yeah.
because it's blue.
Not
but
when you have
the blue
night mode
rectangle,
on.
the magic rectangle.
When you wear blue
Yeah.
light blocking glasses. No.
But yeah, if you're just sitting there staring at your screen all the time,
And so maybe is that
Are
a
you-
reason why culture seems to have reached such a high point of like inauthenticity over the last few years, is because now you just have a bunch of people with no wisdom, essentially.
well,
That's a blanket statement. I don't mean that.
This goes back to
obviously, but
technopoly too, and the glut of information out there without purpose and without.
we gotta be very careful not to put our foot into this rabbit hole, because we are deep into. We're an hour and 30 in already.
Okay. Well,
So.
we can make a note of this for a follow-up episode, but to me, if you have people that are staring at magic rectangles all day long and they are just being stimulated and just ingesting massive amounts of information
Yeah.
without the maker of that information having original thought, a strong thesis, a stance, a way to challenge the status quo, whatever, or just like truly sharing knowledge or wisdom. You just have people that are just sort of numbed by the magic rectangle and they can't make authentic content because all they know to do is to take, if they're even have this level of awareness, to take the ingredients from the recipes they've consumed and just try to make that themselves.
Like a facsimile of the
Yeah, and it's a facsimile, a copy, a parody, whatever some theft of something else.
Well, and we talk about it all the time too. It's always the surface level that is being copied. They're always missing the point.
Right.
They're trying to copy if you just shoot something on your phone and you're like
That's right.
in the left lower third,
Yeah.
that's what's making this popular.
Right.
It's always missing the
And that's where the people who follow the rules, like, well, you can't bold your slug lines in your screenplay because that's breaking the rules. Like hell, I can do whatever I want in my screenplay. If it's good and it's engaging and it creates an emotional response in the reader, I can get away with murder with this thing.
Yeah. And as soon as you do, everybody's going to try to do that.
That's exactly right.
And that
then
becomes the new norm.
And they'll do it because it didn't come from a place of authenticity, earnestness, purity of intention, and it'll just feel like a ripoff.
Yeah. It's never the end. It's never the end point. Everything is constantly in flux. We have too much of I need to possess this thing, this idea, this whatever, in our society, I think. And understanding that just everything is in flux is a very powerful way to contend with that, especially in terms of, presenting something with authenticity, I think.
Well, and then just, making something where the thing you're focused on is the outcome, not the inspiration that would make you want to make something.
Yeah.
Short-term thinking versus the long view, outcomes versus inputs, whatever. I don't even know if that's a thing, but that was my whole career. Not going to go in the rabbit hole, but everything I've done we talked about in a previous podcast, I've got this somewhat traumatic experience that I want to write a screenplay around, but I have to come up with this commercial formulaic vehicle for it because
the haunted runway.
The main priority for me is selling something and paying off my student loans and winning the lottery so I can keep doing this. But that's what's going to keep you from having from having something to have a agent or a manager read your script and go, 100%, holy shit, this is something.
Like, you just nailed it.
Yeah.
Like, at that point, you're just playing the lottery.
Yes.
If you're being yourself, though, and you reach a level of craft that authentic originality, you're almost guaranteed that something's going to work.
Right. And this
like it's just, it is almost, in my perspective,
yeah.
and it just from what I've seen, it's almost impossible. Like if you reach a level of craft paired with a level of originality and authenticity, it's almost, there's no chance.
A matter of time.
Yeah, it's a matter of time.
Especially
If you're doing the other way though, you're constantly just jumping on whatever the thing is.
Yep.
Go buy lottery tickets. You're doing the exact same thing. You're just changing the.
And you might win the
structure a
lottery
little
with
bit.
that. If I kept writing scripts
You
like that,
might win the lottery.
Yeah.
100%.
I got
Or you might
really
get
close.
really good at creating
Uh-huh.
that thing that's close
right.
enough.
Yep.
And then it's just mass produced.
Yep. Yeah.
Is that gonna outlive you? Probably not.
Yeah.
Does that matter? Also probably not. We all put different weight into different things, but
Well, and you hear about burnout, and you hear about this YouTuber's quitting or scaling back, or this screenwriter is pursuing something else, or this novelist is doing something else. I think a lot of times that is an indicator for the fact that maybe they weren't leading their work from a place of authenticity and from the truth of inspiration.
Yeah.
It was from outcomes. Well, I gotta keep the lights on, so I'm gonna write this script, or I'm gonna write this novel. I'm gonna write a sequel to this novel.
There's also
I wouldn't normally do it, but I can't pass up $4 million and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's good. Maybe we like it. That sequel novel or that script or whatever. It's like it's good. There's craft there. There's some moments that really ring true, but ultimately it didn't come from that pure true place.
Or maybe it's so authentic though, and I'm going to counter that.
Ooh, yeah.
Because
Are we debating right now, Alex?
there's a person in the YouTube pipe community
Oh,
who also like that high status,
Yeah.
like legendary figure in that small sub community,
yeah.
and just stopped making videos like 3 years ago.
Yep.
And people are like, why did you stop making videos? You made the best videos.
Yeah.
Like this guy was literally like, and he's just like, I said everything I needed to say about it. And
else to
that
say.
like, why would I spend like, that's how
Yeah.
like dialed in they like,
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I had anything else. Like I'd sit down and do a video and I just didn't,
Yep.
I had nothing else to say. I'd already said it. So that's it.
That's it.
So, yes, burnout as like you could stop as a result of burnout.
Absolutely.
Or maybe because you're out of touch with something.
Yep.
But then also I think there's something incredibly authentic about just being like, I had nothing else to say.
Well,
like
that's
my whole
what,
purpose was to, figure this thing out.
Yeah.
And I think I accomplished that. Now I've got other life to go live.
That's what I recall. I don't know if it's a legend at this point, but Harper Lee saying that after To Kill a Mockingbird.
Said
Why didn't you ever
everything
write
you
it
had to
up?
say.
I said everything I had to say.
Yeah.
And I think there is like supreme beauty in someone being able to resist continuing something they built because of expectations or possibly the financial aspect or like just the habit of it, and to say, I said everything and I moved on to something else. Maybe it was a different craft, different
Steve Martin
hobby
in
or
comedy.
whatever. Yeah, right. Steve Martin's like,
he
wrapped it up.
he felt it changing and he was like, this isn't what I
Yeah.
loved.
And sometimes that's it too.
Yeah.
That
it became
the world
something
of the
outside
thing,
of him.
Yeah, betrays
And
what they think it should be. And
yeah.
they go,
And then he said,
I'm not going to be a part of this.
I'm going to go focus on something else.
Yeah.
So there is incredible authenticity, I think.
Well, and that's the reciprocity of it, right?
Yeah.
If I'm going to give YouTube my authentic videos, I'm expecting some authenticity back from them. They start fucking with that shit too much
yeah.
and betraying us
You're
in some way.
You're gonna start going. Oh, I'm just
We're
go to
gonna-
my website.
yeah, we're
go
gonna-
to yeah.
Yeah, we're going to find some other way or some other.
I think that's why a lot of people are so frustrated with the algorithm things and
Right.
stuff like that. But anyways, we are way over.
we are way
It was
over.
a long
It
episode.
was a good
We got a little sucked in there.
one camera down. I'm only going to have wide angle coverage
The one
for
day
30
you're late.
minutes. I know the one day I'm lit. Son of a bitch. This was all by design.
I do.
I'm
think,
going to assume benevolence from you that you did not plan. on
Yeah,
having
I
that
planted
camera,
that
right?
camera. I actually think we
Matt,
might
you
need
son
to.
of a bitch. You
the
didn't go golfing. You didn't
rechargeable-
go golfing with me. I'm only give you half full batteries. You son of a bitch.
I think it might be a sign that it's. So we're about to hit our year.
Are we? Yeah, this will be 25, right? No, 26.
25 or 26.
Well, 20. Oh, yeah. We don't want to like say what.
No, but it's something like
Yeah.
that.
Because you have one in the hopper right now, right?
Yeah.
So next week's, no, not next week, but the week after is 25. Then I think this one would be 26.
Is
This
it?
might be.
This is the year?
This is the year episode.
Wow.
And way to go out, well, not go out, but go into the next season, next year strong. Episode 26 coming in hot, buddy, with a nice
it's a good
little
one.
disconnected two-parter that we masterfully linked together.
And then the
Of course, I have no coverage.
I think we need to fix the batteries because we've run into a couple battery issues. So we'll fix that for.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, 1 year studio sessions, buddy.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer. So